is Local Water Done Well, and Brent and Luke come and have a yarn to us, please.
Run through the side.
Deja vu, and then we've got
Morning, chaps.
Mr. Mayor, so today we'll just present the formal paper for the adoption, discussion and adoption of the options to go out and consult with the public. Just reminding you that this is a follow-on, this is a follow-on from the very comprehensive briefing that we gave, the public briefing we gave you last week on the 11th, where we went through and discussed details on the business case and the financial models. So Luke's going to run you through a quick recap of that now, and we also have Mitch from the finance team and Paddy from the treaty relationships team here to answer any questions as well.
Kia ora. All right, so this is a presentation just to cover off the key points of the paper and the report and the decisions that are required. So we'll do a recap on the context, provide another overview of the legislative framework that we're operating within, provide an overview of our consultation requirements, provide an overview of the service delivery models, discuss the evaluation framework, and then outline the decisions being sought from the council. So Local Water Done Well, it's a centrally driven reform aimed to address New Zealand's long-standing water challenges. It does provide some flexibility, however, it puts a strong emphasis on compliance and centrally directed regulatory requirements. At its core, the key principles are that water services must be financially sustainable, delivery models need to be fit for purpose, and there's an expectation that the government's new stricter rules around water infrastructure and water quality will drive appropriate investment. In terms of the process and where we're at the moment, initially the Water Services Repeal Act was introduced in February last year, and that reinstated council ownership and control of water services and assets. Then there was the Preliminary Arrangements Act that was enacted in September that requires councils to prepare a water services delivery plan. Part of this is determining what the service delivery model going forward would be. And the Local Government Water Services Bill that was introduced in December, we briefed you on that last week, and we've prepared a council submission which you'll be considering next week at F&P. Now we're at the stage where council needs to start developing its water services delivery plan, so that's underway, and make decisions on water service delivery models. So that's all the detail behind that is outlined in the comprehensive business case that you've been provided with in the report. Just to recap on the legislative framework. So we've talked about the Repeal Act. There's the Local Government Water Services Arrangement Act. So this is the key thing where we've outlined the water services delivery plan and the requirement around that. The fundamental thing is the plan must detail our proposed service delivery model, as well as the baseline asset, finance and infrastructure data and strategies for meeting the new regulatory obligations. And the Local Government Water Services Delivery Bill. So this actually includes the available or mandated water service delivery models that we can consider, the economic regulation regime set by the Commerce Commission, and the enhanced standards for wastewater and stormwater. We expect that to be enacted mid this year. So the selection or development of a water services delivery plan. Where am I in my notes? So basically, it's a core requirement of the reforms. It's mandated under the Preliminary Arrangements Act. We need to detail our water infrastructure and future investment needs. We need to outline our financial and operational strategies to meet the regulatory standards, and it needs to be submitted needs to be finalised and submitted with the Department of Internal Affairs by September 2025. And like I've said, a fundamental part of this is the inclusion of our proposed water services delivery model. As mentioned before, there's a directed set of delivery models that we can consider going forward. So the first one being we can deliver service directly. So that's the in-house model, and that's what we're doing currently at the moment. Noting that there would need to be enhancements to that just to meet the new regulatory standards. We can transfer responsibility to a water organisation, so that's a CCO, and that would be via a transfer agreement. We can contract with third parties for service delivery, however, we would still retain governance and pricing control. We can enter joint arrangements with other councils, so that would be a regional entity, usually via a CCO. We can also become shareholders in other water organisations that have become that are established by other councils. If a water organisation is used, so that's a CCO or a regional CCO, it needs to be a company. Needs to be owned by councils, consumer trusts, or a combination of both. It has to operate exclusively in water services or related activities, and it needs to have an independent, competency-based board. It cannot include elected members or council employees. In terms of the assessment, council needs to the legislation provides a comprehensive analysis and consultation process. So we need to show a clear rationale for our proposed model. We need to show the advantages, disadvantages, and trade-offs of each model. And we need to focus on key impacts such as rates, council debt, service levels, and any charges or costs to consumers for water services. We're also required under the legislation to undertake formal consultation as part of the process. So there's two options here. We can either follow the standard consultation and engagement provisions in the Local Government Act, or we can use a more streamlined approach, which is included in the Preliminary Arrangements Act. This is designed to simplify the process to enable us and other local authorities to meet the September deadline. If we do take the alternative consultation procedure, we must evaluate and present at least two models, and these two models need to be the in-house model in either a water services CCO or a joint partnership with other councils. We can include other models as well, but importantly, the council must clearly identify its proposal and make this really clear in the consultation material that's put out to the public. So on that, there's three key decisions that have been presented to you. The first one is approving the consultation approach, so whether to follow the standard LGA process or the tailored one provided under the Preliminary Services Act. Second decision is the approval of options for consultation, so which specific delivery models to include. And then the approval of the proposed model. So selecting the preferred model to present to the community as council's proposal. So just to recap on the delivery models, we evaluated a wide range of options from the outset, and through that process, three primary options emerged as viable options for Christchurch. That is retaining water services in-house within the council structure, transferring all water services to a professionally governed council-controlled organisation, which will be solely owned by the council, and a hybrid model where water supply and wastewater would shift to a CCO and stormwater would remain in-house, which is a two waters CCO. They each offer a different balance of council control, asset ownership, and financial considerations and compliance pathways. So firstly, in-house, under this approach, council retains full responsibility and control over Three Waters management, as we do today. All decisions from governance to operations would remain in-house. Funding would continue through existing tools like rates and borrowing. However, financial ring fencing would increase the transparency. The council would keep direct control over how water services are charged to the community, and meeting the new compliance standards would fall fully on the council. That's both with the Commerce Commission and Taumata Arowai. Just noting, while it's the closest to the status quo, it's important to note that this model would still require changes to adapt to the new regulatory environment and meet the local water done well expectations around financial sustainability and investment. So a full CCO, this is on the other end of the spectrum. Here, an independent council-owned entity is established to operate all of our water services, and it would be governed by a professional board. Council would retain ownership and strategic oversight, but operational control would shift to the CCO. Elected members and council staff cannot be on the board. The entity has its own balance sheet and borrowing powers up to 500% of revenue, which is more than council's 280% cap. However, it does face restrictions on charging, so it can't use rates, and it must shift to a fixed charge or volumetric type charge within 5 years. Direct accountability for compliance would move to the CCO. So while it's still council owned, it does represent a significant shift towards a more independent, more commercially orientated entity. Now, the Two Waters CCO, obviously that's a hybrid. Here, water supply and wastewater are transferred to the CCO while stormwater remains in-house. This allows for the professional oversight for water supply and wastewater, however keeps stormwater integrated with other council functions like flood control, land drainage, parks, wetlands, and so on. Funding is split, so the Water Services CCO has greater borrowing power for its share of the services. However, stormwater remains under the council financial frameworks. Compliance responsibility is divided between the two entities depending on the requirements around the services that they provide. Water supply and wastewater charges would still require to be some sort of charge. However, the stormwater could still be done under the current rating. So this model tries to balance independence for the larger water services while acknowledging and retaining stormwater as a key element of urban planning and development. So other options that were initially evaluated, we did explore these. So the first one, joining a regional multi-council CCO, shifting to a consumer trust model, or pursuing a shared services partnership. So they're not shortlisted for the detailed analysis purely due to governance challenges, cost factors, or a poor fit for our specific needs in Christchurch. However, we are engaging with Dunedin City Council to explore opportunities for collaboration through new ways of working. So this would focus on leveraging expertise, improving efficiencies, and finding scales of economy to enhance water services delivery for both communities. So we use a pretty rigorous framework for evaluating the options, and it's divided through two lenses. So the first one being a strategic assessment focused on the alignment with Christchurch's priorities, objectives, and community expectations, And this was followed by a detailed financial assessment to validate the affordability and sustainability of each option. So the strategic lens really focuses on what matters most to the community and residents, while the financial analysis stress tests that strategic fit to ensure that we can actually do what we say we do in a prudent, sustainable way. So running through the strategic assessment, we use 7 criteria. So the first one, value to ratepayers, that's about balancing service quality, costs and investment for the long haul. Regulatory compliance, can we meet existing and future standards effectively? Financial agility, that's around the flexibility to fund infrastructure, manage our debt and respond to the unexpected. Service delivery and operations is around ensuring effective day-to-day provision of water services. Governance and control, that's striking the right balance of council oversight, accountability and independence. Community expectations, that's around our ability to meet public expectations for engagement, transparency and accountability. And implementation feasibility, that's around the feasibility risks and complexity of a transition to the new model. So these factors reflect what we've heard from council as the most important lenses for evaluating the options. So scoring was applied against each criterion, ranging from 1 to 5. So there's a comprehensive description of the assessment and the framework and scoring methodology in the interim business case. All of the criteria were weighted equally, with the exception of implementation feasibly, which is assigned a slightly lower weight to reflect its shorter term impact compared to the other factors that influence long-term success. So I'll quickly run through the assessment findings. And like I say, the full detail is in the interim business case. So first, in terms of value to ratepayers, the in-house delivery model provides immediate value by leveraging existing council systems, avoids the high transition costs associated with the CCO models. It ensures stable service delivery at a lower cost to ratepayers in the short term, particularly given Christchurch's current financial health. Both CCOs will have a professional board, and a single focus offers potential long-term efficiencies. However, they do have high setup costs that could dilute the short-term value. In the Two Waters CCO, similar administrative complexities and similar transition costs to the CCO. In terms of regulatory compliance, all 3 models are capable of meeting the current and future regulatory standards. In-house model would use our established processes, whereas the CCO would achieve compliance through new systems processes. In terms of financial agility, the CCO models, they stand out in terms of borrowing capacity. They can leverage more, up to 500% of revenue. It makes it well suited for large-scale, long-term projects. However, you've got to acknowledge that there is debt servicing obligations and reliance on achieving operational efficiencies in order to achieve the financial sustainability. Even though the in-house model is technically constrained to 280%, that provides sufficient headroom to meet our anticipated investment needs without incurring any additional financial risk. And obviously the Two Waters CCO has got the hybrid approach between the two. In terms of service delivery and operations, the in-house model, it supports operational synergies by integrating water services with other council functions, such as flood management, land drainage, parks and urban planning. The CCO models, they introduce some governance separation which could enhance service focus, but there is a risk that operations are fragmented, particularly in managing interdependencies between the water services and other council activities. So these would need to be managed appropriately. In terms of governance, the in-house model provides the highest degree of transparency and accountability because it's got direct council oversight, ensuring decisions consider community priorities. The CCO model, while it does allow for specialised governance, it does risk a perceived detachment from the council and the community. However, the bill, it does provide the council as a shareholder with the ability to influence the operations of the CCO through governance arrangement and strategy documents. Obviously, the Two Waters CCO retains some more direct accountability and community input by keeping stormwater within council oversight. However, the divided governance, it could complicate decision making around the complete package of water services. It should also be noted that the council would retain full control over how it charges under an in-house model, whereas the CCO would be required to shift to more targeted water charges. In terms of community expectations, the ability to engage with the community would be strongest under the in-house model, as it maintains input through the LGA democratic decision-making processes, and it can leverage our established engagement mechanisms. There is a risk that the CCO has a perceived level of reduced transparency and accountability. However, they would need to put the right systems, the right processes in place to be able to engage and consider community in their decisions. In terms of implementation feasibility, the in-house model is the least disruptive, it's the most straightforward to implement, and it's unlikely to require major structural changes. However, both CCO models involve significant establishment costs, transition risks, and operational restructuring. So that would need to be managed appropriately. So here's a summary of how the scoring turned out. So obviously here the in-house model scored the highest, followed very closely by both CCO models. All models are feasible, all models can achieve the regulatory requirements, and they can all achieve financial sustainability. Now we'll move on to the financial summary. While Mitch comes up, I'll just run through the framework that we use. So firstly, for the financial assessment, we looked at rating impacts, both the short and long-term effects on ratepayers and the implications of shifting to a charging model. We reviewed our capital expenditure compared to depreciation to confirm the long-term viability of infrastructure investments. We looked at how each model could ensure that they can generate enough revenue to cover day-to-day operational costs as well as necessary infrastructure investments. We looked at how each model could ensure that they could borrow prudently for long-term needs while managing repayment and financial obligations. And we looked at the financial implications of establishing and maintaining new governance or operational structures.
Morning all. So the first item we'll look at is the rates and water services impacts. The in-house model offers rating increases that will continue largely in line with the annual plan, draft annual plan and LTP that has been proposed to date. Through council decision making, it can avoid abrupt increases and the likes. The WSCCO model requires a short-term increase in rates to meet implementation and transition costs. However, in the long run, that is offset by operational savings and efficiencies. Over 10 years, the cumulative rates increase between the three models is substantially the same. The key difference is how the water services charges will be applied to rates. If water services remain in-house, the council will be able to continue to charge rates based on property value, which is the current methodology. If water services are transferred to a WSCCO, then within 5 years, they cannot be based on property value and must be based on another method such as volumetric or fixed charging. This will likely shift the burden of water services charges on ratepayers. We cannot say at this time what that burden shift will be, as the fees will have to be determined by the board, and that will determine how it lies. So revenue sufficiency, as a reminder, revenue sufficiency is, does revenue meet operating costs? Can you cover your day-to-day expenditure? Balanced budget compares your revenue to your expenditure over time. All the models, both the water services and in-house and remaining council, will have a balanced budget by 2028-29 at the latest. In most models, it's achieved the year prior. The balanced budget largely improves over time, which we'll have seen in the modelling, due to the implementation of higher rating for renewals. Operating surplus and cash ratio really tracks making sure you've got sufficient cash to cover your ongoing expenditure, which all the models meet those requirements. Investment sufficiency, as a reminder, is the capital investment required to meet growth, regulatory requirements and maintain the current network of assets. Based on the annual plan and LTP infrastructure strategy in all years, total capital expenditure exceeds depreciation on water services. However, from 2028 to 2040, depreciation exceeds capital expenditure on renewals. If it was determined this was an issue for investment sufficiency, the council or water services entity has a number of funding options available to increase the renewals and pay for it. That's set out in the business case. These methods and their financial impacts would be the same for all three of the delivery models. So borrowing and debt management. The in-house model, as Luke said earlier, will have a 280% debt to revenue cap. So for every $1 of revenue you have, you can borrow $2.80. The WSCCO has a higher limit of 500%. However, that's offset by, of course, having lower overall revenues than the in-house model, which can use the council's economies of scale to borrow more. The council has determined it's prudent to maintain at least a $600 million headroom for any unforeseen shocks and events. All the models, both remaining council and the WSCCO, will retain the $600 million within their borrowing limits. Having a higher debt limit does not necessarily mean that the water services entity can just borrow more, as doing so would put pressure on its revenue sufficiency, as its costs would increase and it would have to manage them. From operational and transitional costs, the in-house model, as it's fairly continuing as per normal, avoids a lot of transitional costs. There will need to be some adjustments to meet the new regulatory requirements. The WSCCO offers efficiency through specialisation, however does come at a cost of implementation and additional governance costs, which are largely offset by the operational efficiency gains. So from an overall point of view, all three of the models are substantially very similar and achieve similar levels of financial sustainability and financial flexibility.
Thanks, Mitch.
So just a quick recap. So in terms of the strategic assessment, the in-house model has come up with the highest score, showing that it aligns best with Christchurch's current priorities and context. The CCO models, they offer benefits, but they do introduce an element of complexity and potential misalignment with council's overall strategic objectives. The Two Waters CCO attempts to mitigate this by balancing the benefits of having stormwater in-house However, it would introduce some coordination complexities. As Mitch said, all models can achieve long-term financial sustainability. The in-house model provides the most predictable and prudent approach. And the CCO models, they do offer greater borrowing power, but they do have the trade-offs in terms of higher debt servicing and the reliance on achieving efficiency gains to offset the transition costs. So just quick recap on the decisions. So approval of the consultation procedure. So the staff recommendation has been to adopt the streamlined consultation process under the Preliminary Arrangements Act. Approval of options for consultation. The staff recommendation is to include all three models in the public consultation. So that is the in-house, the water services CCO, and the two waters CCO. And then the approval of a proposed model. The staff recommendation is to select the in-house delivery model as the council's preferred option to present as the proposal during the consultation. In terms of next steps, so council today is to consider and approve the consultation approach. Through March and April, or March, public consultation will occur, and this is separate from the annual plan. In May, there would be hearings and deliberations. June, the council would be presented with a final report to decide the preferred service delivery model. And between then and September, we'd be looking at completing the water services delivery plan and having it lodged with the DIA as required.
All good?
Questions?
Right. Going forward, I'm happy to move this, and Pauline's happy to second it. Gentlemen, I just have to say, great presentation. I know we've heard it all before, but it needs to be publicised here so that people in TV land, the public can see what's happening in this chamber. But it just shows the phenomenal amount of work that has gone in behind this. So very well done. So we're into questions. I have Mark, Vic.
Thank you. Having seen your presentation, read the report, the option that would, I guess, give us the least likelihood of moving to volumetric charging would be the in-house model. Would that be correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Vic, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mindful that our water infrastructure is in the long-term asset category, I'm really keen to understand a little bit more about the long-term financial modelling. And in the presentation, you specifically mentioned that it aligns with the annual plan. Of course, we operate on a 10-year long-term plan, and I'm interested in how it aligns with that. And beyond that, for the 15 to 30-year modelling, have you actually done that work? And can you assure us that you haven't loaded the capital investment and the borrowing well beyond the 10 years? I hope that makes sense.
Yes, that does make sense. So you are correct, the annual plan and LTP initially covers a 10-year period, which has been the basis. So the capital plan that we've included in our modelling for the initial 10 years is as per the draft annual plan. For the following 20 years, we have used the capital plan as presented in the infrastructure strategy, which was in the long-term plan document. We've also run that through a funding model, same as the initial 10 years, and it continues on more or less the same trajectory.
Okay, so how many years out have you modelled?
To 2054.
I do have another question, if I may. You touched on the governance and control in the slides where you talked about full council oversight. I'm interested in understanding what structure do you have in mind for an internal business unit, whether you've put any thought into that, and perhaps how much operational restructure would be required to support that.
Certainly, Councillor. We're just in the early stages of that now in terms of considering the effects of some of the legislation that has been passed and is still in train as to what type of resources we need for reporting requirements, for example, and auditing and that sort of thing. So we're going through looking at that. The day-to-day operations and managing of contracts and what have you will still remain same type of resource levels indicated at the moment, and some of the structural things that we're going to talk to staff about and get ideas is just around whether we need to shift a little bit of focus on a day-to-day basis, mainly driven by some of the requirements of the legislation. So not envisaging huge. Anything in support, you're already aware that we have to ring fence everything that contributes to Three Waters. So the shared services, we'll be going through looking at those and doing service level agreements with other units within council to make sure that we can prove what we're getting and how much it's costing. So it's that type of thing that we're going to be working through over the next period.
Okay, well, I look forward to seeing that in due course. Can I just touch on then the financial ring fencing? I could ask how confident you are that we can achieve that. I'm mindful that it is going to be a bit of a leap. I don't want to have to rely solely on your say-so that we can do that. I'm keen to understand, have you actually done some work already in terms of what steps are required to achieve that? And can you share that with us? Or do we just have to rely on your say-so that you're confident we can get there?
Brent can answer that.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Your Worship. Look, there's a number of steps and layers to that, Councillor, and there is already there's already a measure of separation. If you look at the way the financial statements are presented, you'll see that the assets for water are shown separately. You'll see that there are activity statements and funding impact statements in both the plans and the annual reports that indicate what funds those activities and so on. So there's already that a degree of, if you like, containment or separation that identifies those. That I think will be further strengthened and enhanced because the Commerce Commission themselves will also want to make sure that we demonstrate that we are showing the independence of funding and of expenditure. So I think there will be some external agencies that will look to that, being Audit and the Commerce Commission, but that there is already that work underway and, if you like, a structure for it to develop further.
Thank you, that's comforting. The final question is a bit of an outlier. You noticed in your presentation that you're collaborating with Dunedin City Council. I was just curious, why have you chosen Dunedin City Council? What is it about them that aligns to us, and how do you choose who to collaborate with?
Well, at a high level, Dunedin City Council is a large metropolitan type organisation. Dunedin reached out to us a while back, looking at new ways of working together and what sort of efficiencies could be gained, so we have been in talks with them, just saying, well, what does that look like? It's not the water services delivery as per the Act, which is the physical, what we do on a day-to-day basis. A lot of it's around the what systems do we use, what have we got that they don't have, and how can we work together? So it's by working with a metropolitan of it's not a similar size but a large size, there are a number of efficiencies that we see that we could get. Yeah.
Are they the only ones you're going to collaborate with?
So they are the only ones that are in the position to turn their mind to this at the moment, and both parties have been very clear that they could and would extend it to other councils when they are in a position to want to do that too. Yeah.
Okay. Sarah, please.
Thank you. A question on the mana whenua involvement. So in March last year, Ngāi Tahu expressed a desire to engage on the development of options for councils, and I'm just wondering whether the staff who were developing these options have had direct conversations with mana whenua over the development of the options to this point.
I can make a brief comment, then ask Pari to comment as well. I did meet with Te Kura Takapini last year, and at that point, the legislation was still on its way, and we looked at engaging when we had something concrete to engage about, noting that under the legislation we don't have a choice on the models to a point that we have to consult on anyway, but Pari might be able to comment a bit further on what we've done and what's planned.
Yeah, excuse me. Look, I'll make no bones about it. We could have met with Runanga earlier. We have done some work around communicating better and creating better engagement methods. So, and I've met with Runanga to make sure that happens.
Thank you.
Aaron, please.
Yeah, two questions. One is, we're not concerned about the timeline for our consultation part, given that annual plans at the same time, and that we'll only get a handful of submissions on this,
Councillor,
given it's so important.
Yeah, the timelines are effectively being driven by the requirements of the legislation, by us having to, essentially we don't have a choice, we have to have this back and through council and lodged by September.
So, and we wouldn't be able to do that if we did the consultation for this in June.
No, we wouldn't have time for hearings and analysis.
And then the other one is, what happens if in the consultation people say we like the idea of the council control, well, the in-house model, but would rather volumetric charging? What do we do then?
Well, we'll be bringing all of the feedback back to council for analysis and deliberation. So,
would we have a choice to move to volumetric if we?
There is currently nothing to stop you making those sort of choices. There will be some work required to carry that out, but previously this council has gone to excess water rather than full volumetric charging, and that's the current system.
That was popular.
Hey, mate. Celeste, please.
Kia. Thank you. That was a very good presentation. This is a follow-up to Councillor Keown's question. What was to happen if we did actually miss that deadline? I understand we're being asked to meet the deadline, but it's not the first time we've made the decision not to notify something. Or
This would be a major failing if we availed that deadline, and would probably lead to intervention of some sort.
And within the bill there are options for government to intervene, and at a couple of different levels to assist us.
All good? You all right, Celeste? Good? Okay, Tyrone, please.
I think Brent just answered my question in answering Councillor Keown's question, but I'll just double check. So let's just say, comparing the funding model for what I'll call number 2, Water Services Council Controlled Organisation model. So that has to be done through volumetric and fixed fees.
Within 5 years.
Which could even be something like a rain tax to pay for stormwater. Like
it could, so long as it's
could
not
be, but not limited to,
value based through the rates.
So
it
it
could
has
be
to be done
a
by
fixed
that.
charge. Yeah.
Whereas with number 1, which I think is what you said, which I think you implied, which is there in the in-house model, there is actually nothing to stop the council going to a fully volumetric pricing.
And I would suggest that would be driven
Unpopular,
by some very
but
extensive
possible.
consultation and,
Yeah.
and a council decision.
No, that's
yes.
cool. Just so I understand. Thank you.
Okay, James, please.
Thanks for that, Phil. Look, I actually prefer the CCO model with the assets remaining in council ownership. And while I appreciate that view might not be a universal one, I guess my question is, in recommendation 5, do we have to identify the proposal or preferred delivery model as part of the consultation?
Yes, we do.
Is there a requirement to do so?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
Thank you, Paddy. Yanni, please.
Thank you. In the briefing, I asked a question around which model would give us the greatest ability to remove chlorine from our water. and I think I was told that there wasn't any difference. But on the presentation, when I look at the strategic assessment findings, community expectations and governance and control have the highest weighting, percentage weighting, in terms of the benefits for the in-house model. So, yeah, I just wanted to kind of reaffirm that the model that gives us the greatest degree of control to meet the things that the community want, recognising that we do have some limitations around what we can do in the regulatory space, would be the in-house model. So if we got to a point where we wanted to do what was necessary to remove chlorine from the water, the decision to do that, we'd have far greater ability to do it with the in-house model than the other two. Is that correct?
In my view, that would be correct. The only other way through a CCO would be a very specific and detailed a statement of expectations. But the board of a CCO is driven by complying with regulatory requirements, so that would add some complexities to it.
I just acknowledge the huge amount of work that you've done in that space and the comprehensive
phenomenal
presentation. Thank you.
Pauline, please.
Mine's just a question on the consultation document. Is that okay? It's just that we're looking at the CCOs and you're mentioning the borrowing capacity. So I'm actually on page 21 here, and it's just got note in bold. This would, and then the rest of it's not bold. This would lead to the CCO having higher debt levels, which will have to be serviced by the CCO. I think that should all be in bold because I think that's a really key point that people need to understand. Yeah, you can borrow more, but someone's got to pay for it. Just to make sure that
this will be designed up. It's only a raw wording.
So emphasise that would be good.
We'll take that on board.
In both of the CCO models. That was all. Thank you.
Okay. We're all questioned out. We'll move into any debate, discussion. Anyone want any? Fire away, yeah.
Acknowledging the work that's done, it's in physical form, because my laptop's died on me. It's quite impressive, so thank you very much for that. Pauline mentioned about the debt. So if you go to a CCO, it's got the ability to do 500%. It's just digging the hole digger with a different shovel. When the bank rings up and says, hey, you can borrow, we want to lend you so much money, you can do this, or up your credit card, you can have a platinum card and we can lift this. It is just digging a hole, saying no. It's because at the end of the day, the two things are, we must deliver good water to our residents, and we must get rid of the bad water. They have to happen. And whatever shovel you choose to use, whether it's the in-house, the three waters or the two waters, it will, if there's failure, like Wellington Water, if you like, it's going to come back to this table, and we will have to make decisions that will affect our ratepayers. So there is no way around this. You can put all the glitter in you want in whatever system you want, but there are just some key facts, and they are the facts. So good luck. Thank you.
Samuel?
I really hope people have a say on this. It's been quite a contentious issue for quite a long time. And, I'm just really pleased with the work that the team have done because, in my view, it validates what a lot of us have said for quite some time, which is there actually is not an issue with our water in Christchurch. Yeah, chlorination is contentious, but actually the infrastructure and the mechanisms sitting behind it are good. Our organisation knows how to deliver infrastructure well, and we can do it in an efficient and effective manner. And by simply moving this out of the council, firstly, I think takes away a strong democratic component of key infrastructure and key services that council should be providing. But secondly, creates massive layers of management, additional boards, and a heap more costs. So I'm kind of pleased that I am pleased that we've gone out with an identified preferred proposal, I should say. And I think that is the right way to go. But, the reality is that if you look at the different mechanisms for borrowing money, the solution long term is not to get to 500% of revenue like you said, Tim. It's actually to look at the wider infrastructure funding. So, and I don't think any proposal has ever yet identified the fact that we need more money from central government in this space, and we actually do, I think, as a community, given the assets we have. So I hope people have their say, but I think this really validates the fact that Christchurch's water is in a good space. this continues to deliver effective and efficient infrastructure for our communities. And, the people that work within this organisation know how to do it well. And, I hope that's reflected in the consultation.
Sarah, please.
Thanks so much. And again, I'd like to thank staff for the enormous amount of work in what's a relatively short time for the scale of the proposals that we're putting forward here. I think our preferred option is preferred. I think it's what our community will probably prefer through this process, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the community. I think that having the accountability around the council table is really important, and for us to be honest and open about the state of our infrastructure, which is not good. It's okay, and we're doing better than most in the country, but that doesn't mean that it's good, or that we're meeting anywhere near international best practice on much, especially our drinking water pipes and many of our wastewater ones too. We know that when we push out rating for renewals, that it costs our community more. So when we borrow instead of rating to renew our pipes rather than building new capital infrastructure, we end up paying back $2 for every dollar that we've borrowed. So it effectively costs our communities twice as much over time when we push out that rating for renewals. I think our communities will come to expect more and better of us as that understanding deepens, and I look forward to not only hearing the response to this, but the questions in the annual plan around rating for renewals as well. Thanks.
Tyrone?
No, it's great to get to this stage. I mean, it's work that needs to be done. I'd argue that most people in Christchurch have good water services, but some communities don't have access to clean drinking water, or have or pump raw sewage into harbours that are in direct contravention of our obligations under the Treaty of Waitangi, and just a lot of suboptimal things that we do that do need to be looked at. I have confidence that at the moment our council have those things in hand and are doing it well. But it's good. It'll be good to get the communities, our communities out there, and to say exactly what's on their mind and how they think that we should deliver this stuff, because it's not getting any cheaper, and we've got some quite big tasks ahead of us in terms of renewals and actually just solving some of the big long-standing problems that we've had. So it's a good process to go to. I would encourage Banks Peninsula residents to submit in numbers, but I probably don't even need to encourage them, because they will, I'm sure, anyway. So I look forward to seeing what they have to say.
Mark, please.
Thank you. Picking up on Councillor McDonald's point there around the governance of the options here today, and we as a council pushed back strongly against the previous government's Three Waters proposals, and today I think what we're seeing here through the proposal to put out to the public that we would like an in-house model as our preferred option, that gives us the best governance control over the future of Christchurch's water. We potentially would look to lose effective control if we get into the CCO model, so that would make me very nervous. And I think the people of Christchurch would be quite nervous with the idea of not having their elected representatives having enough input into the model. So good to see us get to this point today. Also, having the elected representatives' input into the control of Christchurch's water going forward gives us the opportunity to set the direction for the charging for it. Does it go through general rates? Does it become a fixed fee, or does it go volumetric? That gives us around the table the chance to listen to our communities and set that direction, rather than have it taken out of our hands and done by another board, which is paid hefty fees for directing the direction of Christchurch water. So hopefully the people of Christchurch, even though it's going to be a busy consultation period here between the annual plan and this, will actually be able to jump in and put in constructive feedback and submission towards both of these, because they're both crucial. This local water done well is a huge direction for Christchurch, and it'll be good to hear what the people have to say, and to give us the steer on where to land this when it comes back to the table.
Thank you. Aaron?
Yeah, so I just want to touch on a couple of points that haven't really been covered off. Firstly, I think one of the strongest or biggest submissions we'll get is not even in there, and that's around chlorine. Nearly every submitter will mention taking chlorine out of the water, and the irony in a democratic country where people don't get a say on whether they have chlorine in their water or not is not lost on me. Given that at the point that we were about to introduce chlorine to Christchurch's water, I asked the medical officer of health, because I was on the DHB at the time back when those things existed, and there was a public interface with health. But that aside, I asked the question, how many people have got sick from Christchurch's reticulated water? And the answer to that was 0. So we spent millions of dollars solving a problem that didn't exist. And to all those staff that work in water that might hear that they're not doing that good of work because our water's not in that good a shape, it is in good shape. And it's not perfect. No, it's a long way from perfect. A lot of things aren't. But that's just like adding chlorine to your water when it's not really needed. And I truly believe that people of Christchurch and any district in New Zealand should have a say on whether chlorine is in their water and whether they're willing to take the risk when the risk was already sitting at 0. It was put on us. We don't like it. It has ruined a lot of infrastructure. I know we're not allowed to talk about that. You're not allowed to talk about the thousands of hot water cylinders that got written off because you could probably see a class lawsuit coming at some point in the future. But that aside, we won't talk about that publicly. But you know, a plumber can show you the damage that was done to those copper water cylinders. It's a chemical reaction from the chlorine. So we will hear on that. And the other one is volumetric charging. I do hope we hear about that, because the biggest inequity in our rating system in Christchurch is the way we charge for water. Given that from a calculation I saw, that's just under a 2,000% difference from the lowest to highest from what I've found. I may be able to find a bigger gap, but that's a huge difference in what people pay for their water. And that is, by definition, what I'd call inequity.
Thank you, and I really want to get moving along. Jake?
I wasn't going to debate because I was going to save that for after we've heard from the people, but given volumetric charging has been put on the table and there's been a lot of discussion and there's clearly some that want to open that can of worms, I would encourage people, if they have strong views on that subject, you know, if people, either way, if people in low socioeconomic communities are worried about their rates doubling, have your say.
Yanni, please, and then we'll put it.
Thank you. I was tempted to call a point of order on Councillor Kewen, but I thought I'd let him finish his speech. But when he said we've spent millions, he's actually wrong. We've spent tens of millions, probably close to 100 million on it, right? We have spent a fortune on the imposed forced chlorination of our water, both temporary and then looking to the permanent. And I'm strongly supportive of any model that gives us the greatest ability and the greatest level of control to take the chlorine out as soon as possible. It has been going on for far too long. We've had this Mickey Mouse discussions with central government for many years now about how to get an exemption, and the goalposts kept changing, and the money that we had to pay kept getting more and more expensive. And as has been pointed out, for a relatively low risk. I would also take exception to his comment that there was 0 risk. Actually, there's always a little bit of risk, but you mitigate and you manage that risk. And we have done that as a city incredibly well for a huge number of decades. And in fact, without the earthquake, we would be in such a better position. And it's extraordinary that central government has not only never really seemed to recognise with the water reforms the unique circumstances of Christchurch having both a massive earthquake that destroyed and damaged so much of our infrastructure, but also we had without any say of our local residents, we had the Banks Peninsula Council come into our city and we picked up the huge cost to do the water investment in that community. And despite the challenges we've had post-earthquake, we continued to invest in doing the right thing, both culturally and environmentally, on the peninsula in terms of our 3 waters. So it's ironic that government wants to point the finger at us and wants us to reform. And thankfully, we've got to a situation now where we're getting in a much better space. about having a model that we're in control of, that we choose. So I hope that we get a lot of public feedback on what people would like. I should also point out, because it's, as we near the anniversary of the earthquake, and I've sent this memo around councils before and I'm happy to do it again, but the SERA version of the Wastewater Design Guidelines, DG43X, was terrible for our city. It basically meant that the council version was to propose to fix all major holes and cracks, defects in the sewers as coded through the NZ Pipeline Inspection Manual and as recorded by SCIRT through the citywide inspection program. SERA's version was to fix critical faults across all areas and only looking to pick which ones were considered critical. At the time of the meeting, the SERA's representatives could not clearly define how this could be implemented by design teams, and CCC did not also understand how SERA proposed to measure the network performance. Effectively, what that meant is we got less money than we should have had from central government to fix our waters after the earthquake. We got design guidelines that actually didn't fix our infrastructure properly, and we've had a massive cost as a result. So I support the work staff have done on this. Let's get it out for consultation. I'm strongly supportive of the in-house model that gives us the greatest degree of control.
Pauline, please.
Look, I can't really follow that very well. I am also supportive of this preferred option going out for consultation. Look, we're really, really precious about our water here in Christchurch. We know that. We hear it all the time from our people. But I think that this council, we have our house in order when it comes to the Three Waters delivery. We've got our 10-year, obviously our financial planning, but our 30-year infrastructure strategy, and we have capacity to fund and deliver. We can borrow more if we need to. We have that capacity. A council-controlled organisation is not only distanced from us, but it's very, very expensive to set up, probably really expensive to run, having a board, etc. Yes, it can borrow more, as Councillor Scandrett has alluded to, but you still have to pay. So I believe that the preferred model today that we're putting out for consultation, along with the other options, it retains the local ownership, and I think that's a key factor here that people tell us they want. And it retains the local decision making, but at the same time it enables us to address our key challenges, such as the ageing infrastructure. So let's hear what people have to say on this, but hopefully they will support our preferred option. Thank you.
Lastly, he says with trepidation, Mel?
No, I'm happy to see this go out to consultation. I just wanted to say I hope that people do not submit to us about chlorine in the water. Nobody likes it, but any of these delivery models is not going to take it away. So there's no point filling up a submission on that point when actually that's not what the submission is about. So please, when it goes to, when people want to talk about this, tell us which delivery model you want, and we'll be happy to hear it.
Okay, I'm last. Once again, I'd just like to thank staff for the phenomenal amount of work that I see it, we all see it, how much they're doing behind the scenes. It's out of control. And please, people out there, have your say, because it certainly helps. Right, well, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Thank you, that's carried. Brilliant. So we'll have 15...
So can you just record my vote against number 5? Thanks.
Roger. What are we going? 25 past? Yep. Please. Thank you.